When a homeless man in New Haven, Connecticut stumbled upon a piece of paper on the ground, he had no idea just how much his life was about to change because of it. This wasn't just a crumpled up receipt or a misplaced to-do list, but instead a gateway to success thanks to one woman who let the paper slip out of her hands. And she soon hatched a plan that would be the difference between changing this man's life, or letting him return to the streets. New Haven winters are harsh for everyone, with freezing conditions and snowstorms forcing you to shovel your driveway multiple times a day. However, for Elmer Alvarez, winters were especially severe as he had been living on the streets for several years. Even though he was living rough, Elmer was still determined to seek help for his addiction, and he had hope that he wouldn't always live on the streets. He attended Narcotics Anonymous, where he was encouraged to live a better life. Not only were his meetings a place that sheltered him from the cold, they eventually helped him beat his addiction for good. Every day, Elmer thought about ways to get off the street, but the idea of it was a lot easier than actually doing it. However, one day Elmer would carry out a selfless act that would give him a golden opportunity to turn his life around. He just didn't know it yet. On a cold November morning, Elmer was wandering the streets when he came across a piece of paper lying on the ground. Discarded papers like this are oftentimes just a simple grocery store receipt, but they could just as easily be a winning lottery ticket. When Elmer looked closely, he saw it was a signed check. As Elmer stood on the pavement holding a check with somebody's signature written on it, he immediately realized that he was holding something valuable. It wasn't until he read the amount on the check that his mouth dropped. Elmer was shocked that he had found a check for a whopping $10,000. He knew that somebody somewhere was probably freaking out looking for this check that he was now in possession of. Examining the check further, he discovered a phone number written on the back. With an endorsed check in his hand, Elmer could have easily visited the nearest bank and changed his life by taking a stranger's hard-earned money. But instead, the homeless man that was battling freezing weather conditions went in search of a phone to call the number on the back of the check. After pacing the streets in search of a phone, Elmer found a friend who he knew owned a cell phone. As a Spanish speaker who knew very little English, Elmer asked his friend to make the call on his behalf. A few blocks away in her office, self-made CEO and president of Outreach Realty Services and Outreach School of Real Estate, Roberta Hosky picked up her phone to an unexpected call. Elmer's friend explained to her that his friend had found an endorsed check with her name on it and wanted to return it to her. Roberta was floored as she didn't even realize she had lost the check. The successful businesswoman couldn't believe someone could be so selfless and return a check with a substantial amount on it, especially a person in need of that money. However, Roberta wasn't yet aware that the person who found her check was in fact homeless. Roberta made her way back to the street not only to collect her misplaced check, but to meet the honest men returning it to her. She decided to go live on Facebook to document this incredible moment and to show her loyalty and respect to Elmer and his friend. When Roberta met with both men, Elmer was too modest to mention that he was living on the streets. However, his friend explained to Roberta that Elmer was indeed homeless. The real estate mogul knew that Elmer returning this check to her was a true testament of his character. Before Roberta became CEO and president of 2 companies, she also lived a life stricken with poverty. At just 17 years old, Roberta dropped out of school to care for her baby, but her financial difficulty meant that she and her child had to sleep in housing shelters to avoid living on the streets. Roberta worked hard to secure herself an internship at Yale University, which allowed her to transform her life. Although Roberta found an opportunity to break the cycle, being homeless shaped her into the person she is today. The successful CEO never forgot about her nights at the shelter. Roberta knew what it was like to be in Elmer's situation and felt serious about rewarding him for his loyalty and humbleness. Instead of giving him a reward that would temporarily alleviate his problems, she wanted to gift him with something beneficial in the long scheme of things. While sharing her story on Facebook Live about helping Elmer find a way out of homelessness, one of her followers suggested something that sparked a light bulb for Roberta. "I'm going to teach him how to fish," she exclaimed. Back on the streets, Roberta rewarded Elmer with a check, and this time, it was written out to him. Roberta shared with Elmer her personal journey of living in housing shelters before setting up her own business. The pair bonded over their similar stories and eventually said their goodbyes. But Roberta was not finished with Elmer, and she then left to go work on her plan. Roberta had plans to come back to Elmer with plans to help him break out of homelessness and reconstruct his life from the ground up. However, their next meeting would be sooner than Roberta anticipated. While he was standing in the bank attempting to cash his reward, the bank clerks were wary of Elmer. Although he produced his ID, they were still suspicious of the homeless man standing in front of them and refused to cash the large amount of money. As a result, the bank called Roberta to clarify, and she quickly reassured them that this money was meant for Elmer. 2 weeks later, the self-made CEO arranged for Elmer to meet her in her office. With over 13,000 Facebook users following Roberta's story, the media grew interested too. When Elmer stepped into her office, he was blown away by the crowds of people waiting to celebrate him, including TV crew and cameras, but what came next would shock him even more. Elmer was awarded a certificate from Ms. Millionaire Mindset, an organization that focuses on eliminating poverty. Moments later, Roberta explained to Elmer her plan to teach him how to fish. Roberta gifted Elmer with free classes at her real estate school as well as English lessons to improve his communication skills. But Roberta did not stop there. She emotionally revealed to Elmer that she had found him and his girlfriend a place to live, rent-free and bills covered for the first 6 months, on one condition. He had to be able to pass his real estate classes. After completing and passing his real estate classes, Roberta hooked Elmer up with a job interview at her colleague's real estate office. No longer sleeping in the cold streets of New Haven, Elmer was climbing the ladder in life with Roberta's guidance and support. As Roberta continued to document her inspirational friendship on Facebook Live, her followers increasingly grew, and with that came the attention of the media. The pair even appeared on talk shows speaking about their unique story and discussing the crisis of homelessness. Today, Elmer and Roberta are working on building a transitional house that will provide shelter to homeless teenagers and young adults. Although it won't earn them a penny, the project aims to get young people off the streets and help them build a safer future, something Elmer and Roberta can relate to personally. If you enjoyed this story, wait for our next story starting in 10 seconds. How a bike shop owner found out he was Jeff Bezos' father. Jeff Bezos is one of the richest people on the planet. In spite of this, his biological father had no idea who he was until it was almost too late. When he found out that fact, he decided that he was owed just one thing from his world-famous son. But, how did a local bike owner in Arizona find out that he was the father of the richest man on Earth? When an unusual customer entered Ted Jorgensen's bicycle shop in Glendale, Arizona in 2012, the elderly unicycle enthusiast could never have guessed what he was about to learn. It turned out that he was the biological father of one of the wealthiest people on the planet, and he had no idea. Jeff Bezos is the founder of Amazon, one of the largest online retailers on the planet. He is currently worth an estimated $116 billion, and seems perpetually eager to earn more, for some reason. Bezos is the son of Jacqueline and Mike Bezos. Mike married Jeff's mother when the billionaire was 4 years old, and adopted Jeff shortly after. Mike is Jeff's dad, but not his biological father. His biological father had no idea who his son grew up to be. If you've ever wondered what the offspring of teenage parents can achieve, look no further than Jeff Bezos. Born Jeffrey Preston Jorgensen, his biological father was just 18 years old when he was born. His mother, Jacqueline Gies, was just 17 years old and a junior in high school at the time that she became a mother. Ted Jorgensen was an aspiring circus performer, known for his unicycle skills. When he and Jackie discovered that she was pregnant, the two quickly got married and began planning a life together. Sadly, things didn't go to plan. The couple's relationship began to deteriorate not long after Jeff was born, and before he was 2 years old, his parents had divorced. Ted said that the last time he ever saw his son was when little Jeff was just a year old. His mother brought him to see his father, who was working in Walmart at the time. Ted could clearly remember Jeff's little coat that he was wearing at the time. Jeff has been understandably dismissive of his biological father in the years since. He has said that the only time he ever thinks of Ted Jorgensen is when a doctor asks him to fill out a form. Jeff's father is Mike Bezos, and he doesn't spare much thought for the man who sired him. Ted later claimed that making the decision to leave his family was the biggest mistake of his life. Nevertheless, he didn't make any attempt to reconnect with them. He had a phone number that might have put him through to Jackie, but his ex-wife had warned him not to interfere with her new family. Said Ted, "I used to wonder all the time though whatever happened to Jeff. Then I just reached a point where I thought he was long gone. That was the only child I ever had. That makes a difference, too. The last time I saw him he was in diapers." Jorgensen moved on with his own life. He married his second wife, Linda, and became stepfather to her 4 children. His love of unicycles continued, and he opened a cycle shop. Jorgensen would have gone to his grave without ever knowing the fate of his son had it not been for a visit from a journalist. Ultimately, research for a book suddenly gave Jorgensen insight into the family he'd given up so many years ago. In 2012, reporter Brad Stone was researching a biography on the founder of Amazon entitled The Everything Store, Jeff Bezos and Amazon. To learn more about Bezos' early years, Stone decided to track down his biological father, but there was a problem. When Stone first approached Jorgensen in his bike shop, the aging man not only didn't know who Jeff Bezos was, he wasn't even all that aware of Amazon. Jorgensen didn't ever get along with computers, so his offline life didn't have much need for an internet marketplace. When asked if he remembered Jeff Bezos, Jorgensen didn't have a clue who Stone was talking about. The name rang a bell, but he'd never been in much contact with Mike Bezos, and had no reason to remember his biological son's adopted name. Stone explained to Jorgensen why his biological son was such a big deal, and just how much money he had made with Amazon. Jorgensen was taken aback to say the least. According to Stone's book, when he was shown photos of Jeff Bezos, Jorgensen began to tear up. This was his only biological son, grown to adulthood. It was an emotional moment for the man, who had long given up hope of ever seeing his son again. It was interesting to discover that his long-lost offspring was so wealthy, but Jorgensen had a more pressing issue. He was dying and time was running out to connect with his son in a meaningful way. Jorgensen suffered from emphysema. While he didn't know how much longer he had left to live, he wanted to meet his son one last time before he went. And he didn't desire or feel any need to discuss his son's wealth. He only wanted one thing from his son. All Jorgensen wanted to do was meet with Bezos and shake his hand. He wanted to congratulate him for all that he'd made of himself, and tell him that he was proud of his achievements. There was just one problem. Jeff Bezos is a very wealthy, very busy man, and as such, it's hard for anyone to actually schedule some of his time if he doesn't know them. Jorgensen and his wife tried to contact Bezos, but were repeatedly unsuccessful. Jorgensen insisted that he didn't want a penny of money from his son. He merely wanted the opportunity to make things right. Sadly, he never got that chance. 3 years after learning the identity of his long-lost son, Jorgensen passed away. He never got the chance to see Bezos again, and died without getting to shake his hand. One of Jorgensen's relatives argues that this whole situation wasn't really Ted's fault. He was a teenager, and not emotionally prepared for the burden of a family at that time in his life. The story of Ted Jorgensen is a reminder of how important it is for all of us to cherish our loved ones. No matter how a family is formed, we should make the most of our connections to each other while we have the opportunity.